Did you know that there are certain forms that you have to get filled out correctly on your home in order to sell it? Also, what's the square footage of your house and how do you prove that? Today we're going to talk about those two things.
Hey guys, welcome to The Buzz, Coffee and Real Estate. Today we are talking about forms and measurements. How do you measure your house? How do you prepare so that you can give all the information that is needed to an agent or to a new buyer?
Yeah, this is kind of boring, okay? So we're going to run through it. We want to clear, but it's actually a big deal.
Yeah.
So there are certain forms that you, the seller, are responsible to fill out on your house to communicate the information to any potential buyer. And as well, you're responsible to be able to prove the square footage of your home. And this is not based on tax records or somebody else's opinion. So while it's not like the glitziest topic, these are actually really two critical pieces of the puzzle, because once you start marketing your house, the square footage is huge. Everybody wants to know, hey, what's the size of the home? Oh, and how have you communicated to me the condition and the disclosures and all that? So here in North Carolina, we really have three different disclosures. Can you kind of jump into that?
Yeah, sure. So the first one is the residential property disclosure. We call it the RPOD, but basically what that is that you as the seller or our client as the seller, whichever is the case.
Depending on how you're doing it, Realtor or doing it by yourself. Yep.
That's right. So you'll have that form, and basically it's a 4-page form, and it's got all the details about the house. You know, is there any leaks? Is there any thing that's wrong with it? Do you have a HOA? Do you have, age of roof, age of HVAC, age of, all the different systems? And so that one kind of digs in deep, and that's a big deal, because if you as the seller fill it out incorrectly, or you mark it as no, there's not a problem, and it's a very obvious thing that could have been known about, then you can be kind of, brought into breach of contract.
Yeah, you really could. So it's like 50 questions. I mean, it's a lot of different things. And with any of the questions, it's all yes, no, or no representation. Okay, so let's say, hey, what is the age of your roof? And then it's a blank. Okay, 2007. Do you know of any roof leaks? And you can say yes, no, or no representation. Now, we have counseled people to check no representation on real estate if they've not lived in the home.
That's
let's say it was a rental, or hey, I inherited this from my mom, or whatever it is. Hey, I don't have a lot of knowledge about this house, so I'm going to check no representation. But if you have lived in the home and you're checking, no representation, what that means is either I don't know or I don't want to tell you, which of course throws big red flags for a potential buyer. So that's form, really just fill it out to the best of your knowledge.
That's right.
I mean, if there's something that yes, some people don't know all the different components of the piping underneath their house or things like that. And Josh said something like, which I completely agree with. If you have an obvious problem, let's say you got a huge stain from a leak in your ceiling, but you say, hey, the roof wasn't leaking.
Yeah.
Okay, that's going to be a problem down the road, because somebody is going to have paid a price for the house based on the information that you gave them, and now all of a sudden they're finding something different.
That's right.
However, very oftentimes we find something in the crawl space or behind a wall or in an obscure closet. I mean, so there's a bit of common sense that goes into it.
That's right.
It's just hey, fill it out to the best of your knowledge. Don't try to lie.
Yeah.
Stuff will get found during the course of the home inspections and everything. So, but that's a big deal, because all potential buyers are all taking a look at that list. Okay, when has the heating and air been replaced? When has the roof been replaced? All those, So, all right, so that's the first form.
Yeah. So second form is the oil mineral rights. So this one's been notoriously found because of D.R. Horton.
Yeah. So there was a huge class action lawsuit where a bunch of different people, and I think it was out somewhere in the Midwest, Texas or somewhere.
Texas, I think.
And this was 20 or 30 years ago, where they had these huge subdivisions, but they quietly sold off the rights to the oil to gas companies.
Yep.
And so somebody, Jed Clampett out in his backyard and shoots at a rabbit, and all of a sudden oil spurts out of the ground. Yay, we're rich. And then they realize, no, we're not rich, because the rights to those minerals and oils underneath the ground actually belong to somebody else. Huge lawsuit. It was a big deal. North Carolina, of course, we don't have a whole lot of precious oils and minerals in most areas of the state. However, that became a national form. So kind of give a quick example. What are you typically checking on something like that?
So there's 6 actual lines on it. The first one is as the previous seller severed the rights that I'm aware of, and then it's did you sever the rights, and are you aware of anything that could have been done?
Yeah.
It's kind of the 6 questions that they ask.
So typically we're, of course, no, we haven't severed the rights. I mean, I've never run into a property in 8 years where they severed the rights, here at least. And then, of course, I don't have any knowledge about whether a previous owner has severed the rights. So, don't know, no, don't know, no. That's a pretty easy form to fill out. And the buyer will initial all those different spots. So that's form number 2.
Yep.
What's form number 3?
So form number 3 is the lead-based paint disclosure, and that one is if your house was before 1978, if it was built before then there's the potential that it could have had lead-based paint used in it. And so the big thing with that is that if anybody were to eat the paint chips or something were to happen,
somebody starts sanding the wood trim around the windows and throws a bunch of dust in the air. Typically those sealed. So it's been painted over 4 or 5 times since 1978 or 1964 or whatever it was. But still, if you were to get that and start chipping away at it or sanding it or that sort of thing, it could become an issue. But that form is only required
if it was built before.
If it was built, so if house built in 1979, no need to even work with that form.
Exactly.
And that form also allows a buyer to understand, okay, here's the age of the house. We can have it checked if we want to, if that's a big deal. We rarely have anybody that goes through that trouble. It's not a common inspection. So
it does give the option. It says, hey, I want the right to be able to investigate, or I don't.
Gotcha.
But other than that, that's really the big things on it. It's more or less, I think the big thing or the bigger concern is if someone was to inhale or ingest those paint chips, it can cause brain damage. And so that's the big reason why they don't want you to do it.
That would be a big deal. So in order of importance, residential property disclosure, which we listed first, mineral oil and gas priority second, and then third priority would be lead-based paint. But it is required before 1978. So let's shift a little bit into measurements.
Yes.
So why don't I just look up the tax card measurements on my county's website and go with that?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times the county records are going to pull in places that are unheated and uncooled. And so maybe you have like a sun porch or a Florida room or something along those lines, and they've added that square footage into your amount. And so you may be 400 square foot over what you actually are. Or they've done an addition, or they've added on to the house since, and they didn't notify the taxes or the tax people.
Yeah.
And so since they haven't done that, now the house has got this addition that's been added or something. And so
it really could be significantly larger or significantly smaller.
Yep.
Zillow pulls off the tax cards, especially if it's not been a recent sale.
Yep.
So we just say, and here in the real estate community, we don't use anybody's previous records to come up with the square footage.
That's actually the rules from the NC State Board.
Yeah, so it's against the rules for us. You can, if you're selling it yourself, I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
And really, I don't recommend measuring a home yourself either.
Yeah.
There's a difference between interior measurements, exterior measurements. Kind of depends a little bit on whether your home is just one big box, or so many times it's got little gables, or it's got picture windows, or it's got kind of some weirdness. Maybe the second floor is not quite as tall as the first floor, or not quite as large as the first floor. Maybe you've got a garage that you've got to deduct out of the first floor. There's just a lot of different. I mean, if you just finished middle school geometry class, you might be okay. But a lot of us just haven't. I mean, I'm a real estate agent and also kind of a math nerd, and I've made mistakes on a couple of different ones, and so really we've moved a lot of our policy to just having an appraiser measure it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had one that we measured, and we both kind of were like, that doesn't sound right. Something sounds off. And so we had the actual appraiser come out because we're like, something doesn't sound. Like, tax card was this, Zillow was this, we were here, and we were like, it should be somewhat close.
I think I was either 10 or 12% off. It was a lot for the size of the house. And again, if you're working with, cost per square foot, if you underestimate, you leave money on the table, right?
Yes.
You're selling a 1,200 square foot house, and actually the real square footage is 1,400 square feet, but you're selling it like a 1,200. You're leaving tons of money on the table. Yeah. Or I think they give us a 5% variance one way or the other. So let's say you measured it wrong at 1,800 square feet. It's actually 1,300 square feet or even 1,600 square feet. You're now in danger of moving into that place where it's considered a breach of contract.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually had this happen. This was about 4 years ago. my buyers came in. It was a small house, a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. They went under contract on the house, and then they came back in during the inspections and appraisal process, and the appraiser came to us, and he said, look, I did a double check on the measurements, and I'm coming up with like 200-300 square feet different. And we went back to the sellers, and the whole transaction ended up falling apart because all of a sudden my folks were like, well, that's an astronomical cost per square foot.
Yeah.
You know, we thought it was this. It was actually significantly less. And it was an honest mistake on the part of the sellers, but it was still a mistake, and it caused the whole transaction to fall apart. We were able to get all the money back out of it because it was a breach of contract. I mean, they were selling false advertising on the measurement. So it's a big deal. It can cause a transaction to fall apart in a hurry.
Well, and you have to think too, like most houses right now are $150 to $250 a square foot, depending on the size and what the interior and stuff like that is. So, I mean, you think about it, if you're 200 square foot off, you do the math.
Oh, yeah, that's
significant.
Yeah, 20, 30 grand easy in value that you've thrown it off one way or the other. So, I mean, we pay $7,500 to have most houses measured. Big ones are a little bit more expensive, but I would just say keep it simple. Reach out to an appraiser. That's something that we cover if we list a home. That's part of our fees that we just handle on the side. We don't pass those along to the sellers. But if you're doing it yourself, I would recommend reaching out to a certified appraiser.
Oh, totally. And like you said, we had already talked to you guys. Now, just going back one episode or 2 episodes where we talked about hiring an appraiser if you're for sale by owner.
Yes.
You would then have that document.
Sure.
That would have measurements in it.
Sure.
And so that would be helpful for you as well. So that could limit some of your costs, also limit some of the problems that could come.
I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
If it costs $3,000, then but it doesn't. It's just it's very low cost for that service. Okay, so we've talked about forms. We've talked a little bit about measurements, where not to get the measurements from, where to get the measurements from. One other part of the certified appraiser, if you get it, then it's going to have a sketch with it as well, which is kind of nice. You can put that in your forms that you give to potential buyers. It's nice to have a floor plan, basic floor plan. So that's pretty much it. I mean, that's, again, kind of the boring piece of the puzzle, but it's part of you getting the infrastructure set in place so that when you list, you're giving correct information. Can you think of anything else that you got on that particular topic?
I don't think so. I think most of the part is just really making sure that you've got everything filled out correctly.
Well, and part of this whole seller series is making sure it's going to feel like there's so much work up front. But if you get the 80% of the work done up front, it's going to make that last step, when it's for sale, under contract, and closed, it's going to make that just flow so much more smoothly. If you rush this process right now and all of these pre-listing checklist items, then you're going to run into serious problems down the road. So that's really what we're trying to prevent. One, to be able to give what's normal, but also just to urge you, please do the due diligence up front. Make sure you've got all your ducks in a row so that when it goes on the market, it's the correct information, done correctly. Actually, we're getting ready to jump in next episode. We're going to talk about some pictures and video and some of that aspect. So that's going to be really fun. That's right in our wheelhouse, especially Josh's. And we can give some wisdom on that and talk about some ins and outs. So I think that wraps us up. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.